I remember our wedding day like it was yesterday. The sun was shining, the air was warm, and everything felt perfect. Jenna, my wife, was radiant, her smile lighting up the room as we exchanged our vows. We had been together for only 6 months, but the connection we shared was undeniable. She was charming, funny, and intelligent, everything I had ever wanted in a partner. Our whirlwind romance had culminated in a beautiful ceremony, surrounded by friends and family, and I was certain that I had found my soulmate. For the first 12 days of our marriage, life was bliss. Jenna was the perfect wife, attentive and loving. She would surprise me with little gestures, my favorite meal after a long day, a spontaneous weekend getaway, or just a simple note telling me how much she loved me. I felt like the luckiest man in the world. But then, something changed, and it all started with a small, seemingly insignificant detail. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I was sitting in the kitchen, sipping on a cold beer and flipping through the channels on TV. Jenna had gone out to run some errands, or at least that's what she told me. As I glanced out the window, I noticed a courier walking up to the front door. I didn't think much of it. Maybe it was a package Jenna had ordered, or perhaps a gift she had planned for me. But then I saw something that caught my attention. Jenna was already outside, waiting by the gate. She greeted the courier with a smile, exchanged a few words, and took an envelope from him. She glanced around quickly, almost as if she was making sure no one was watching, before slipping the envelope into her purse and heading back inside. When she walked through the door, she looked as calm and composed as ever, but something about the way she tucked that envelope away without a word made me uneasy. "Who was that?" I asked casually, trying not to sound too interested. "Oh, just a courier," she replied with a smile. "I ordered something for the house, a little surprise for you." I smiled back, not wanting to press the issue. Maybe she was planning something special, and I didn't want to ruin the surprise. But still, a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I tried to push the thought out of my mind, telling myself that I was just being paranoid. Later that evening, Jenna and I had dinner together, and she was as warm and affectionate as ever. She didn't mention the envelope, and I didn't bring it up again. But as the days went on, I found myself thinking about it more and more. What could it possibly be? Why didn't she tell me about it? The next few days passed without incident. Jenna continued to be the perfect wife, and I tried to convince myself that everything was fine. But that nagging feeling of unease wouldn't go away. I started to notice little things. Jenna would take her phone with her wherever she went, even to the bathroom, and she seemed a bit more secretive than usual. I told myself that it was just my imagination, that I was overthinking things. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. Then, one evening, while Jenna was out with friends, I decided to go up to the attic. We had been meaning to organize some old boxes up there, and I figured it would be a good way to keep my mind off things. As I rummaged through the dusty boxes, looking for an old photo album, I noticed a small, locked chest in the corner of the attic. It was odd, I didn't remember ever seeing it before. Curiosity got the better of me, and I began searching for the key. After a few minutes of looking, I found it hidden in the lining of one of Jenna's old handbags. I hesitated for a moment, feeling a pang of guilt for invading her privacy. But the thought of that envelope, and the uneasy feeling that had been gnawing at me for days, pushed me to unlock the chest. Inside, I found a few old documents and some jewelry. Nothing too out of the ordinary. But at the very bottom of the chest, beneath a stack of old papers, was the envelope the courier had delivered. My heart began to race as I carefully opened it, not knowing what to expect. What I found inside shocked me to my core. It wasn't just a letter, it was a legal contract, with my name and signature at the bottom. According to the document, I had agreed to transfer the deed to my house, my 2 cars, and to pay Jenna $10,000 a month in alimony if we ever divorced. I stared at the paper in disbelief, my hands trembling as I realized what this meant. I hadn't signed this document, I was sure of it. But the signature on the page was unmistakably mine. Panic set in as the reality of the situation began to sink in. Jenna, the woman I had just married, had somehow forged my signature on a document that would strip me of everything I owned. The thought was too horrifying to comprehend, but the evidence was right there in front of me. I knew I had to do something, but I couldn't let Jenna know that I had discovered her betrayal. Not yet. I needed to figure out what was going on and find a way to protect myself before confronting her. I carefully placed the document back in the envelope and returned it to the chest, making sure everything was exactly as I had found it. That night, I lay in bed next to Jenna, unable to sleep as a whirlwind of emotions tore through me: anger, disbelief, and an overwhelming sense of betrayal. The woman I had fallen in love with, the woman I had married, was not who I thought she was. And whatever her reasons, whatever her motives, one thing was clear: I couldn't trust her. The next morning, I quietly took all of my savings and sought out the best lawyer I could find. I told him everything, showing him the document and explaining what I suspected. He listened carefully, his expression growing more serious with each passing moment. "You did the right thing coming to me," he said finally. "This is a serious matter, and we need to act quickly. If what you're saying is true, your wife is not only a fraud, but she's committed a crime. We'll need to gather more evidence, but I can assure you we'll get to the bottom of this." As I left the lawyer's office, a plan began to form in my mind. I wasn't just going to protect myself, I was going to make sure Jenna paid for what she had done. She had played me for a fool, but she had no idea what was coming. Little did she know, her perfect little scheme was about to come crashing down around her. The days following my discovery were nothing short of agonizing. Every moment I spent with Jenna felt like a charade, a twisted game where I was the unwitting player, and she held all the cards. But I couldn't let her see how deeply she had cut me. I had to keep up the facade, even as my heart bled with the knowledge of her betrayal. Each morning, I woke up next to her, the woman I had once adored, and felt the sting of her deception like a knife twisting in my gut. I forced myself to smile, to kiss her good morning, but inside, I was screaming. How could she do this to me? What kind of person was she, to forge my signature and plot to take everything I had? These questions haunted me, but I buried them deep, saving them for the moment I would finally confront her. The tension between us was palpable, at least for me. Jenna, on the other hand, seemed blissfully unaware, going about her day with the same charm and sweetness that had once captivated me. Every laugh, every touch felt like a mockery now, a cruel reminder of the truth I was hiding. I could feel my sanity slipping as I struggled to reconcile the woman I had loved with the cold, calculating person she had revealed herself to be. One evening, about a week after I found the contract, I decided to test her. We were sitting on the couch, watching a movie, her head resting on my shoulder. It was a scene that had once brought me comfort, but now it felt suffocating. I could barely focus on the screen, my mind racing with thoughts of the document hidden in the attic. "Envelope you got from the courier the other day? What was in it?" Her reaction was subtle, but to me, it was like a bomb going off. She stiffened ever so slightly, her eyes flickering with something I couldn't quite place. Was it fear? Panic? But it was gone in an instant, replaced by that same serene smile. "Oh, that? Just some papers I needed to sign for work," she said lightly, brushing it off as if it were nothing. "Boring stuff." "Why do you ask?" I shrugged, feigning indifference. "No reason, just curious." She relaxed again, snuggling closer to me, but I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. She was lying to me. Again. And now I knew for sure that she was hiding something. The anger that had been simmering inside me began to boil over, but I swallowed it down, determined to keep up the act for a little while longer. As the days dragged on, my lawyer and I continued to gather evidence. I spent hours combing through Jenna's belongings when she wasn't home, looking for any clue, any hint that would explain why she was doing this to me. But all I found were more questions. There were no letters, no incriminating emails, nothing that gave away her true intentions. It was as if she had covered her tracks perfectly, leaving me with nothing but that damned contract. Despite the growing rage inside me, I couldn't help but feel a sick sort of admiration for her cunning. Jenna was good too good. She had played the perfect wife, the perfect partner, and I had fallen for it completely. Now, as I watched her move through our home with that same grace and poise, I realized just how thoroughly she had fooled me. But there were moments, brief as they were, when the facade cracked, and I caught a glimpse of something darker beneath the surface. I started to notice how she would avoid eye contact when certain topics came up, how she would quickly change the subject if I mentioned anything about our future. And then there was the way she clung to her phone, as if it held the answers to all her secrets. It drove me mad, knowing that the truth was just out of reach, tantalizingly close yet still hidden. One night, after another evening spent pretending everything was fine, I found myself standing in front of the mirror in our bathroom, staring at my reflection. I barely recognized the man looking back at me. There were dark circles under my eyes from sleepless nights, my jaw was clenched tight with the stress of keeping up the charade, and my hands trembled with the rage I kept bottled up inside. I hated what this was doing to me, how it was turning me into someone I didn't even know. And yet I couldn't stop. I had to see this through, to uncover the truth and make her pay for what she had done. But at what cost? How much more of myself would I lose before I finally confronted her? As I stood there, wrestling with my emotions, I heard Jenna's voice calling from the bedroom. "Tom? Are you coming to bed?" For a moment I didn't answer, just stared at my reflection, wondering how much longer I could keep up this charade. Then, with a deep breath, I forced a smile onto my face and walked back into the bedroom, slipping into bed beside her. She wrapped her arms around me, her touch sending a shiver down my spine. I wanted to pull away, to scream at her, to demand answers, but instead, I just held her close, playing the part of the loving husband one more time. But the bitterness inside me was growing, festering like a wound that wouldn't heal. I knew that I couldn't keep this up forever. Sooner or later, the truth would come out, and when it did, it would destroy everything. The only question was, who would be left standing when the dust finally settled? A few days later, Jenna left for a weekend away with her friends, at least, that's what she told me. I didn't believe her for a second, but I didn't let on. Instead, I used the opportunity to delve deeper into her secrets. I scoured the house from top to bottom, searching for anything that might give me a clue about what she was up to. It wasn't until I went back to the attic that I found something new. Tucked away in the same chest where I had found the contract, hidden in a false bottom that I had somehow missed the first time, was a small stack of papers. My hands shook as I pulled them out, my breath catching in my throat as I realized what I was holding. They were letters, all addressed to Jenna, and all from different men. As I skimmed through them, my heart sank. Each one was filled with declarations of love, promises of a future together, and most damning of all, details of money they had given her. It was all there, laid out in black and white. Jenna had been playing this game long before she met me, and I was just her latest mark. The final letter was from a man named Robert, dated just a few months before our wedding. In it, he mentioned how Jenna had taken him for everything he had, how she had promised to marry him but disappeared as soon as she had what she wanted. The letter was filled with bitterness and despair, but it was the last line that struck me the hardest. "I hope you find someone who truly loves you, but be careful, Jenna is a snake, and she will destroy you if you let her." I stared at the words, my vision blurring with tears of rage and betrayal. This was the woman I had married, the woman I had given my heart to. And now, I was just another victim in her twisted game. But not for long. I took the letters and placed them carefully back in the chest, my mind racing with the implications. Jenna had been doing this for years, conning men out of their money and leaving them broken in her wake. But now, I had the proof I needed to bring her down. When Jenna returned that Sunday, I greeted her with a smile, my heart pounding as I kept my emotions in check. She had no idea that her little game was about to come to an end, and I wasn't about to tip her off. The pieces were finally falling into place, and as much as it tore me apart, I knew what I had to do. Jenna had played me for a fool, but she was about to learn that I wasn't going down without a fight. The bitterness that had been growing inside me turned into a cold, calculating resolve. I would make her pay for what she had done, not just to me, but to all the men she had destroyed. And when it was all over, she would be the one left broken and alone. The time for pretending was almost over. Soon, Jenna would see the truth, and when she did, there would be no turning back. Jenna returned from her weekend getaway looking as refreshed and cheerful as ever. She greeted me with a bright smile, kissed me on the cheek, and casually mentioned how much she had missed me. But I could barely stomach her presence. The letters I had found in the attic replayed in my mind like a broken record, each word digging deeper into my already shattered trust. Still, I kept up the charade, smiling back at her, pretending everything was normal. That evening, as we sat down for dinner, Jenna was in a particularly chatty mood. She rambled on about her weekend, dropping names of friends I barely knew, and recounting stories that were supposed to be funny but only made my blood boil. I nodded along, forcing myself to appear interested, all the while thinking about the moment when I would finally reveal that I knew everything. But then she did something that caught me completely off guard. "So," she said, her tone shifting from casual to almost businesslike. "I've been thinking about our future, Tom. You know, planning ahead, making sure we're secure." I looked up from my plate, narrowing my eyes slightly. "Oh? What do you have in mind?" Jenna leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms over her chest in a way that seemed almost defensive. "Well, I've been doing some research, and I think it's time we start thinking about, protecting our assets. Just in case anything happens." I raised an eyebrow. "Protecting our assets? What do you mean?" She shrugged, her smile faltering for a brief moment before she plastered it back on. Like making sure everything is in both of our names. The house, the cars, everything. It just makes sense, don't you think? I mean, we're married now. We should be sharing everything." The audacity of her words hit me like a punch to the gut. This was it. This was her move to try and get me to sign over my life to her willingly. My pulse quickened, but I kept my face neutral, refusing to give her the satisfaction of seeing me react. "Interesting idea," I said slowly, pretending to consider it. "But isn't everything already protected? I mean, we have insurance, joint accounts, what more do we need?" Jenna's smile became a little too tight, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of annoyance in her eyes. "Well, it's not just about insurance, Tom. It's about ensuring that we both have equal ownership of everything. You never know what could happen, and I just want us to be prepared." "Prepared for what?" I asked, leaning forward slightly, my voice taking on a harder edge. She blinked, momentarily taken aback by the change in my tone. In case something happens to one of us. We need to be sure that the other is taken care of. It's just common sense." The mask was slipping, and I could see the cracks beginning to show. She was getting frustrated, and for the first time, I could see the wheels turning in her mind as she tried to figure out why I wasn't just agreeing to her plan. But I wasn't going to let her off the hook that easily. "Jenna," I said, keeping my voice calm, "if there's something you want to talk about, just say it. There's no need to beat around the bush." For a moment, she just stared at me, her eyes narrowing slightly as if she was trying to read my thoughts. Then, with a sigh that was more of an exasperated huff, she leaned forward, her expression turning cold. "Fine, Tom. If you want me to be direct, I will. I'm tired of pretending that everything's perfect when it's not. We're married, and yet you keep everything in your name. The house, the cars, the accounts, everything. It's like you don't trust me." I felt a cold chill run down my spine at her words. The woman sitting across from me was no longer the sweet, loving wife I had fallen for. She was someone else entirely, someone calculating, manipulative, and downright vicious. But I still couldn't understand why. Why was she pushing so hard now? What was she planning? "I trust you, Jenna," I said carefully, choosing my words with precision. "But trust goes both ways. Why are you so insistent on this now? What's really going on?" Her eyes flashed with something dark and dangerous, a side of her I had never seen before. She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms with a smug look on her face. "You want the truth, Tom? Fine. The truth is, I'm not about to sit around and let you control everything. We're supposed to be partners, but you treat me like some sort of accessory. I deserve more than that." The words stung, not because they were true, but because of the venom behind them. This wasn't about love or partnership, this was about control. She wanted everything, and she was willing to destroy our marriage to get it. But I wasn't prepared for what she said next. "You think I don't know what you've been up to?" she sneered, her voice dripping with contempt. "I know you've been snooping around, going through my things. Did you really think I wouldn't notice?" My heart skipped a beat, and I felt a surge of panic. How could she possibly know? I had been so careful, so meticulous in covering my tracks. But as I looked into her cold, calculating eyes, I realized she had been playing me all along. She had known, perhaps even from the beginning, that I was onto her. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, but my voice lacked conviction, and Jenna pounced on it. "Don't play dumb, Tom. You're not as clever as you think you are." She leaned forward, her expression twisted with a cruel smile. "I know you found the letters, and I know you've been talking to a lawyer. Did you really think you could outsmart me?" I was stunned into silence, my mind reeling from the revelation. She had known everything, and I had walked right into her trap. But before I could respond, Jenna dropped the final bombshell. "And just so you know," she said, her voice low and venomous, "I don't care about you, Tom. I never did. You were just another mark, another fool who was stupid enough to fall for my act. I was going to take you for everything, and then leave you with nothing. And the best part? I've already started." As the words left her mouth, I felt the ground shift beneath me. My head spun, and my heart pounded in my chest. Jenna stood up, towering over me with a look of triumph on her face. "Look at you," she spat, her voice full of disdain. "You actually thought we had something real, didn't you? But you're just like all the others, pathetic, gullible, and easy to manipulate." I was too stunned to speak, my world collapsing around me as the woman I thought I knew ripped away the last shreds of the illusion I had been clinging to. But then, something happened that neither of us expected. The doorbell rang. Jenna froze, her eyes flicking towards the door with a mixture of surprise and annoyance. Who the hell could that be? Before I could respond, she stormed out of the room, muttering curses under her breath. I followed her, my mind still reeling from everything she had just confessed. As she reached the door and yanked it open, I saw the color drain from her face. Standing on the doorstep was a man I had never seen before, but it was clear from Jenna's reaction that she knew him, and not in a good way. "Robert?" she stammered, her voice suddenly weak and shaky. The man Robert looked just as shocked to see her. His eyes darted from Jenna to me, then back to Jenna, before narrowing with a look of pure hatred. "So, this is where you've been hiding," he said, his voice cold and menacing. "I've been looking for you, Jenna." Jenna's face went pale, and she took a step back, her confidence evaporating in an instant. "Robert, please, I can explain, dash." But Robert wasn't interested in explanations. He pushed past Jenna, stepping into our home with an air of authority that made it clear he wasn't leaving without answers. "You ruined my life," he snarled, his eyes blazing with fury. "You took everything from me, and now you're going to pay." Jenna turned to me, her eyes wide with furious fear, for the first time since this nightmare began. She looked at me as if pleading for help, but I was too numb to react. My mind was spinning, trying to process everything that had just happened. "I don't know what he's talking about, Tom," she said, her voice trembling. "You have to believe me, he's crazy." But Robert wasn't done. "Don't listen to her," he spat, his voice dripping with venom. "She's a liar, a thief, and a manipulator. She conned me out of everything I had, just like she's doing to you. I have proof." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a stack of papers, thrusting them into my hands. I looked down at them, my heart pounding as I realized they were identical to the letters I had found in the attic, only these were addressed to Robert. "She's been doing this for years," Robert continued, his voice shaking with rage. "She preys on men like us, makes us fall in love with her, and then takes us for everything we're worth. She's a con artist, Tom. A goddamn professional." As his words sank in, I felt the last remnants of my world shatter into a million pieces. Jenna, my wife, the woman I had loved, was nothing but a monster. And now, standing in the wreckage of my life, I realized that the bitter truth had finally come to light. Jenna was no longer the one in control. She had been outed, exposed for the fraud she truly was. And as I looked at her, trembling in fear, I knew that the time for pretending was over. It was time for her to face the consequences of her actions. And this time, she wouldn't be able to talk her way out of it. The air in the room was electric, charged with the weight of all the revelations that had just been laid bare. Robert's furious words still hung in the air, and Jenna stood frozen, her face drained of color, her confident facade shattered. She looked at me with wide, pleading eyes, but all I felt was a deep, seething rage. I couldn't hold it in any longer. The months of deceit, the lies, the manipulation, it all came boiling to the surface. The man who had been patient, who had pretended everything was fine, was gone. In his place stood a husband who was done playing nice. I threw the stack of papers Robert had handed me onto the coffee table, the pages fanning out, exposing her lies for all to see. So this is it, huh? This is who you really are, Jenna? My voice was icy, each word laced with venom. Jenna flinched, but then something shifted in her expression. The fear that had momentarily gripped her faded, replaced by a look of steely resolve. She straightened her back, lifting her chin as she met my gaze, her eyes narrowing into slits. Don't you dare talk to me like that, Tom. Like what? I shot back, taking a step closer to her. Like a fool who just found out his wife has been screwing him over since day one. Like a man who just realized he married a fucking con artist? Jenna's lips curled into a sneer, the warmth that had once made me fall in love with her completely gone. You have no idea what you're talking about. You think you're so clever, don't you? Snooping around, trying to catch me in a lie. Well, newsflash, Tom, I am not the one who's been playing games. Oh, really? I scoffed, crossing my arms as I glared at her. Then why don't you enlighten me, Jenna? What the hell do you call this? I gestured to the letters on the table, my voice rising in anger. How many other men have you done this to, huh? How many others were stupid enough to trust you? She didn't back down, her voice sharp and cutting as she snapped back. You don't get it, do you? I did what I had to do. I've been taking care of myself long before you came along, and I'm not about to apologize for it. Taking care of yourself? I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Is that what you call it? Ruining people's lives, stealing everything they've worked for, yeah, real admirable, Jenna. Her eyes flashed with anger, and she took a step toward me, her voice lowering to a dangerous whisper. You think you're better than me? You think you're some kind of victim here? Please. You're just another mark, Tom. Another idiot who thought he could control me. Control you? I barked out a harsh laugh. Jenna, the only one trying to control anything here is you. You've been pulling the strings this whole time, making me think we had something real while you were planning to gut me like a fish. Well, guess what? I'm not falling for it anymore. The room was thick with tension, and for a moment, we just stood there, locked in a standoff, either one of us willing to back down. Robert watched from the sidelines, his anger simmering just beneath the surface, but it was clear this was between Jenna and me now. Jenna crossed her arms over her chest, her eyes blazing with defiance. You can try to play the victim all you want, but you're no saint, Tom. You're just pissed because you didn't see it coming. You thought you could keep everything under your thumb, your house, your money, your precious little life, but you didn't count on me being smarter than you. Smarter? I repeated, my voice low and mocking. Is that what you think this is? A game of wits? You're not smart, Jenna, you're just desperate. Desperate to get your hands on something that isn't yours because deep down, you know you'll never have it any other way. She laughed then, a cold, bitter sound that sent a chill down my spine. Oh, I'll have it, Tom. I always get what I want. You're not the first, and you won't be the last. So go ahead, throw your little tantrum. It doesn't change a damn thing. Is that so? I leaned in closer, my voice dropping to a menacing whisper. Well, let me tell you something, Jenna. You've underestimated me. You think you're the only one who can play dirty? You have no idea who you're dealing with. Her eyes narrowed, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in her gaze. But she quickly masked it with another sneer. What are you going to do, Tom? Go to the cops? Tell them your wife is a liar? Good luck with that. They'll laugh you out of the station. I smiled then, a cold, cruel smile that didn't reach my eyes. Oh, I'm not going to the cops, Jenna. I'm going to make sure you get exactly what you deserve. And when I'm done, you'll be lucky if you can con your way into a cheap motel room. She didn't respond right away, but I could see the wheels turning in her mind, calculating, trying to figure out her next move. I had pushed her into a corner, and now she was scrambling to find a way out. But there was no escape this time. Then, just when I thought I had her, Jenna's expression shifted again, her lips curling into a smirk that made my stomach turn. You really think you've won, don't you? That you've outsmarted me? What are you talking about? I asked, suspicion creeping into my voice. Jenna's smirk widened, and she stepped closer, her voice dripping with malice. You think you're so clever, Tom. But you're not the only one who's been busy these past few days. My heart skipped a beat, a sense of dread creeping over me as I stared into her cold, calculating eyes. What did you do, Jenna? She leaned in close, her breath hot against my ear as she whispered. I've already moved the money, Tom. Everything we have, it's gone. And you'll never find it. I felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. You're bluffing, I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew she wasn't. Oh, I'm not, she said, pulling back to look me in the eye. While you were busy playing detective, I was making sure I had an escape plan. You can have the house, the cars, whatever. I don't need them. But the money? That's mine now. And there's nothing you can do about it. The shock of her words hit me like a tidal wave, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. Everything we had, everything I thought I had protected, was gone. She had outmaneuvered me, and now she was standing there, basking in her victory. But I wasn't going to let her win. Not like this. You think you're so clever, I hissed, stepping closer until we were nose to nose. But you've made one fatal mistake, Jenna. She raised an eyebrow, her smirk fading slightly. Oh? And what's that? I leaned in, my voice a low growl. You've underestimated just how far I'm willing to go to make sure you pay for what you've done. Jenna's eyes widened, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in her gaze. She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could say anything, the door burst open. We both turned, startled, to see Robert standing there, his face twisted with fury. Enough of this bullshit, he snapped, his voice shaking with anger. I'm not letting you walk away from this, Jenna. Jenna's eyes darted between us, her expression turning desperate. Robert, please dash. But Robert wasn't having it. He stormed over to her, grabbing her by the arm and dragging her towards the door. You're coming with me. You're going to fix this, or I swear to God, dash, let go of me. Jenna screamed, trying to wrench her arm free. You have no right, dash, either do you. Robert shouted, his voice echoing through the room. You ruined my life, Jenna. You think I'm just going to let you walk away? Panic surged through me as I watched the scene unfold. Robert was out of control, and Jenna was starting to fight back, her nails digging into his arm as she tried to break free. Robert, stop! I shouted, moving to intervene, but he ignored me, his grip tightening on Jenna. In the chaos, Jenna finally managed to break free, shoving Robert away from her with a strength I didn't know she had. Get the hell off me! She screamed, her voice laced with pure hatred. Robert stumbled back, glaring at her with a look that could kill. This isn't over, Jenna. Not by a long shot. Without another word, he turned and stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him. The sound echoed through the room, leaving Jenna and me standing in tense silence. Jenna's breath came in short, angry bursts, her eyes wild as she turned to me. You think this is over? She spat, her voice shaking with rage. You think you can just sit there and judge me? You're nothing, Tom. Nothing. I stared at her, my mind racing as I tried to process everything that had just happened. The woman standing before me was a stranger, cold, ruthless, and dangerous. But if she thought I was going to roll over and let her walk away with everything, she was dead wrong. No, Jenna. I said, my voice calm and cold. This is just the beginning. Her eyes widened in surprise, but I didn't give her a chance to respond. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving her standing there, seething with rage. As I closed the door behind me, I realized that there was no turning back now. The gloves were off, and it was going to be a fight to the bitter end. But I wasn't going to let her win. Not this time. The door to my study slammed shut behind me with a force that rattled the walls. I couldn't hold it in anymore, the rage, the frustration, the betrayal. It all came pouring out like a dam that had finally burst. My hands were shaking, my breath coming in ragged gasps as I paced back and forth across the room, trying to make sense of the chaos that had become my life. How had it come to this? How had I let myself be fooled so completely by the woman I thought I knew, the woman I thought I loved? The questions pounded in my head, each one more painful than the last, until I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed the nearest thing, an old, heavy paperweight, and hurled it across the room. It shattered against the wall with a loud crash, but the sound did nothing to ease the storm raging inside me. I wanted to scream, to tear the room apart, to let out the fury that had been building up for days, weeks, months. But instead I just stood there, my fist clenched so tightly that my knuckles turned white. The betrayal was a knife in my gut, twisting with every breath I took. I had been so damn naive. I had wanted to believe in Jenna, to trust her, to build a life with her. But all of it, every single moment we had shared, had been a lie. The realization hit me like a freight train, and I felt a fresh wave of anger surge through me, hot and suffocating. I slammed my fist down on the desk, the pain radiating up my arm like a burst of clarity through the haze of rage. You fucking bitch. I spat, the words leaving my mouth before I could even think. It felt good to say it out loud, to acknowledge what she really was: a liar, a manipulator, a thief. But the anger didn't dissipate. If anything, it only grew stronger, feeding off itself like a wildfire. I couldn't believe how much I had loved her, how much I had given her, only to have it all thrown back in my face. The thought made me want to tear something apart, to destroy anything in my path. My mind raced, filled with images of Jenna's smug face, her cold, calculating eyes. How had I been so blind? How had I not seen the truth right in front of me? She had played me like a puppet, pulling my strings, making me dance to her tune, all while she planned to take everything I had worked for. I ran a hand through my hair, tugging at the roots as if the pain would somehow bring clarity. I trusted you, I shouted, my voice echoing off the walls. I fucking trusted you, Jenna. But there was no one to hear me, no one to answer. The room was empty, just like the promises Jenna had made, just like the life I thought we were building together. My chest tightened, a suffocating weight pressing down on me, and I knew I had to get out of that room before I lost my mind. I stormed out, not caring where I was going, just needing to move, to escape the walls that were closing in on me. I found myself in the kitchen, staring at the same counter where we had shared countless meals, where she had smiled at me, laughed with me, pretended to love me. The memories were like poison, seeping into my veins, and I grabbed the edge of the counter, my grip so tight I could feel the wood creaking beneath my fingers. You fucking liar, I whispered, my voice trembling with barely controlled rage. You played me. You played me for a fool. I could see her face so clearly in my mind, that sweet, innocent smile that had hidden the monster underneath. I wanted to scream, to tear apart everything she had touched, to erase any trace of her from my life. But no matter how much I wanted to, I couldn't. She had left her mark on me, deep and indelible, and it was a wound that would never fully heal. The anger boiled over, and before I knew it, I was sweeping everything off the counter in one furious motion. Plates, glasses, and utensils went crashing to the floor, shattering into a million pieces that scattered across the tiles. But the destruction didn't bring the satisfaction I craved. It didn't make the pain go away. I was shaking, my whole body trembling with the force of my emotions. The betrayal was like a physical pain, a deep, aching wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. How could she do this to me? How could she stand there, look me in the eye, and lie to me over and over again? I wanted to hate her. God, I wanted to hate her so much that it would consume me, so that I wouldn't have to feel the heartbreak, the loss, the overwhelming sense of failure. But even in my rage, there was a part of me that still hurt, that still mourned the woman I had thought I married. The thought made me sick to my stomach, and I stumbled back, gripping the edge of the sink as I fought to keep my balance. The tears came then, hot and furious, streaming down my face as the reality of what had happened finally sank in. I had been betrayed in the worst possible way, by the one person I should have been able to trust. Jenna had taken everything from me, my love, my trust, my future, and she had done it with a smile on her face. I didn't know how long I stood there, gripping the sink as I cried out every ounce of anger and hurt that had been building up inside me. Time seemed to stretch and blur, each second passing like an eternity. Eventually the tears stopped, but the anger remained, simmering just beneath the surface, waiting for an outlet. I knew I couldn't stay in that kitchen, couldn't stand to be surrounded by the remnants of the life Jenna had so thoroughly destroyed. I needed to confront her, to unleash the full force of my fury on the woman who had torn my life apart. With a deep breath, I pushed away from the sink, my resolve hardening into something cold and implacable. Jenna wasn't going to get away with this. Not after everything she had done. I stormed out of the kitchen, my footsteps echoing through the house as I made my way to the living room where Jenna was sitting, her phone in hand, her expression a mask of boredom. When she looked up and saw me, her eyes narrowed in irritation. "What's your problem, Tom?" she snapped, not even bothering to hide the disdain in her voice. "My problem?" I repeated, my voice low and dangerous as I walked toward her. "My problem is that I married a fucking con artist who has been playing me for a fool since the day we met." Jenna rolled her eyes, leaning back in her chair as she crossed her arms over her chest. "Oh, please. Are you still going on about that? Get over it, Tom. It's not the end of the world." Her casual dismissal of everything we had been through, of everything she had done, made the anger flare up inside me like an inferno. "Not the end of the world?" I hissed, my voice shaking with rage. "You destroyed my life, Jenna. You took everything I had, everything I believed in, and you pissed on it." She didn't flinch, didn't even look guilty. Instead, she just smirked, her eyes glinting with malice. "You were an easy mark, Tom. Too trusting, too eager to believe in a fairy tale. It was almost too easy." The words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I didn't back down. I stepped closer, my fists clenched at my sides, my voice a low, threatening growl. "You think you've won, don't you? You think you're going to walk away from this scot-free, with my money in your pocket. But I'm telling you now, Jenna, you're not going to get away with it. I'll make sure of it." Jenna laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. "You're delusional, Tom. There's nothing you can do. I've already won." The smugness in her voice, the way she looked at me like I was nothing, like I was beneath her, it broke something inside me. All the anger, the pain, the betrayal, it all came rushing to the surface, and I couldn't hold it back any longer. "Fuck you, Jenna!" I screamed, the words tearing out of me like a primal roar. "Fuck you for what you did to me! Fuck you for making me believe you loved me when all you wanted was my money!" Jenna's smirk faltered, and for a brief moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes, something that looked almost like fear. But she quickly masked it with a sneer, her voice laced with venom. "Get over it, Tom. You're nothing but a pawn in my game, and now it's over. Move on." Her words were like gasoline on a fire, and I felt the last of my restraint snap. I couldn't take it any more, the lies, the manipulation, the cold indifference. I needed to make her feel just a fraction of the pain she had inflicted on me. "You think this is over?" I hissed, stepping closer until we were inches apart. "It's not over, Jenna. Not by a long shot. You might have taken my money, but you'll never take my dignity. And when I'm done with you, you'll have nothing left." Her eyes widened, and for the first time, I saw real fear in her expression. "What are you going to do?" she asked, her voice shaky. I leaned in, my voice a low, dangerous whisper. "You'll see. But I promise you this, you'll regret the day you ever decided to fuck with me." With that, I turned and stormed out of the room, leaving Jenna standing there, her confident facade crumbling. The battle lines had been drawn, and I was done playing nice. Jenna had unleashed the full force of my anger, and she was about to find out just how far I was willing to go to make her pay. And this time, I wasn't going to stop until she was completely, utterly destroyed. The tension in the house had reached a boiling point. The air was thick with unspoken words, anger simmering just beneath the surface. The confrontation we had just had left me seething, my mind racing with the need for retribution. Every moment I spent under the same roof as Jenna felt like a violation, like a personal assault on everything I once held sacred. And as I paced the living room, my thoughts consumed by what she had done, I realized I could no longer stand the sight of her. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. How dare she still be here, in my house, acting as if nothing had changed? How dare she continue to live under my roof after betraying me so completely, so cruelly? My chest tightened with fury, and I felt my hands clench into fists as I marched toward the bedroom where Jenna was lounging on the bed, scrolling through her phone as if the world wasn't crashing down around us. I stopped in the doorway, glaring at her with a mixture of disgust and disbelief. She didn't even look up when I entered the room, her expression one of utter disinterest. The sight of her so casual, so dismissive, ignited a fire inside me that I could no longer contain. "What the hell are you still doing here?" I barked, my voice louder than I intended, shaking with barely controlled rage. Jenna finally looked up, her eyes narrowing as she met my gaze. "What are you talking about, Tom?" she said, her tone dripping with irritation, as if I were the one being unreasonable. I took a step closer, my eyes locked on hers. "I'm talking about you still being in my house," I spat, each word laced with venom. "You don't belong here anymore. After everything you've done, after all the lies and betrayal, you have the nerve to act like nothing's happened?" She scoffed, rolling her eyes as she tossed her phone aside. "You're being ridiculous," she said, swinging her legs off the bed and standing up to face me. "This is my house too, Tom. We're married, remember?" The words felt like a slap to the face. "Married?" I repeated, my voice rising with incredulity. "You think this is a marriage? You destroyed that the moment you decided to con me out of everything I have. You've been using me from the start, Jenna, and now you think you can just stay here like nothing's changed." She crossed her arms over her chest, her stance defiant. "I don't owe you an explanation," she shot back, her voice cold. "This house is just as much mine as it is yours, and I'm not going anywhere." The audacity of her words made my blood boil. "Are you fucking kidding me?" I shouted, taking another step forward, closing the distance between us. "You forged my signature, tried to steal my money, and now you're standing here telling me you're not leaving? Why the hell are you still here, Jenna? Why are you still living in my house?" The room seemed to vibrate with the force of my anger, my voice echoing off the walls as I let out the full force of everything I had been holding back. "Get out!" I roared, pointing toward the door. "Get the fuck out of my house, and don't you dare come back!" For the first time since our confrontation began, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in Jenna's eyes. She wasn't used to seeing me like this, unrestrained, furious, and completely done with her bullshit. But instead of backing down, she squared her shoulders, her jaw tightening as she prepared to lash out. "You think you can just throw me out?" she hissed, her voice trembling with barely concealed rage. "You think you're so righteous, so above it all, but you're nothing, Tom. Nothing without me. I've been the one in control this whole time, and now you're just trying to play the victim." "Victim?" I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh and cold. "You're damn right I'm a victim, you're a victim. You've been using me from the start, manipulating me, lying to me, and now you're going to stand here and tell me I'm nothing? That I'm the one who's wrong? You're delusional, Jenna. Absolutely fucking delusional." Her face contorted with anger, and she took a step closer, her eyes blazing. "You don't get to talk to me like that," she shouted, her voice cracking with fury. "I've done more for you than you could ever imagine. You're just too stupid to see it." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "What the hell are you talking about?" I demanded, my voice trembling with the intensity of my emotions. "You haven't done anything for me except tear my life apart," she sneered, her lips curling into a twisted smile. "You're so clueless, Tom. You think you're so clever, so in control, but you've never had a clue what was really going on. I've been 2 steps ahead of you this whole time, and you never even saw it coming." The arrogance in her voice, the smugness, it was too much. I couldn't take it anymore. The anger I had been trying to contain, the pain and betrayal, it all came rushing to the surface, and I let out a scream of pure rage, my vision blurring with the intensity of my emotions. "Get the hell out of my house!" I roared, my voice breaking with the force of my fury. "Get out, Jenna! I don't ever want to see you again!" Jenna flinched at the sound of my voice, her eyes wide with shock. For a moment, she just stood there, frozen in place, as if she couldn't believe what was happening. But then, something changed. Her expression hardened, her eyes narrowing into slits as she took a step back, her face twisted with anger. "Fine," she spat, her voice low and venomous. "You want me gone? You'll regret this, Tom. You'll regret ever crossing me." She turned on her heel, storming out of the bedroom without another word. I stood there, breathing heavily, my heart pounding in my chest as I listened to the sound of her footsteps echoing through the house. Every fiber of my being was on edge, every muscle tensed as I waited for the sound of the front door slamming shut. But instead I heard something else, something that made my blood run cold. There was a loud crash, followed by a string of curses, and then the unmistakable sound of someone struggling. My heart leaped into my throat, and I rushed out of the bedroom, fear and adrenaline coursing through my veins. When I reached the hallway, I froze, my eyes widening in shock at the sight before me. Jenna was on the floor, struggling against Robert, who had somehow forced his way back into the house. His face was twisted with rage, his hands gripping Jenna's arms as he tried to restrain her. She was fighting back, her eyes wild with panic as she kicked and scratched, desperate to break free. "Let go of me!" Jenna screamed, her voice filled with terror. "You're crazy! Get off me!" But Robert was relentless, his grip tightening as he forced her to the ground. "You think you can just walk away after what you did to me?" he snarled, his voice low and menacing. "You think you can just get away with it? Robert, stop!" I shouted, rushing forward, my anger turning into fear as I realized just how out of control the situation had become. "Let her go!" He ignored me, his focus entirely on Jenna as he pinned her to the floor. "You ruined my life, Jenna," he growled, his voice shaking with rage. "You ruined everything, and now you're going to pay." Jenna's eyes met mine, wide with terror, and for the first time, I saw something in her that I had never seen before: vulnerability. The woman who had been so cold, so calculating, was now terrified, completely at the mercy of a man she had wronged. And despite everything she had done, despite the lies, the betrayal, the manipulation, I couldn't just stand there and watch. "Robert, let her go!" I shouted, grabbing his arm and trying to pull him off her. "You don't want to do this!" But he was too far gone, too consumed by his own anger and pain. He shoved me away, his eyes wild with fury as he turned back to Jenna. "She deserves this," he snarled. "She deserves everything that's coming to her. Please," Jenna whimpered, her voice shaking as she struggled beneath him. "I'm sorry, Robert. I'm so sorry. Just let me go. Please." Her pleas were like a knife to the gut, and I felt my resolve harden. I couldn't let this happen, not like this. Not in my house. With a surge of adrenaline, I lunged forward, tackling Robert to the ground and wrestling him away from Jenna. He fought back, but I was fueled by a desperation I hadn't felt before, and I managed to pin him down, my hands gripping his wrists as I held him there. "Get out!" I shouted, my voice trembling with the effort. "Get the hell out of my house, Robert! Now!" He struggled for a moment longer, his face contorted with rage, but then something seemed to snap. The fight drained out of him, and he went limp beneath me, his breathing heavy, and with a surge of adrenaline, I lunged forward, tackling Robert to the ground and wrestling him away from Jenna. He fought back, but I was fueled by a desperation I hadn't felt before, and I managed to pin him down, my hands gripping his wrists as I held him there. "Get out!" I shouted, my voice trembling with the effort. Get the hell out of my house, Robert! Now! He struggled for a moment longer, his face contorted with rage, but then something seemed to snap. The fight drained out of him, and he went limp beneath me, his breathing heavy and ragged. For a brief moment, the room was silent, the only sound being our labored breaths. Finally, Robert looked up at me, his eyes filled with a mix of anger and exhaustion. "This isn't over," he muttered, his voice low and defeated. "Yeah, it is," I replied, my voice firm but tired. "Now get out." Slowly, Robert stood up, his movements stiff and reluctant. He gave Jenna one last, venomous glance before turning and walking out of the house. The doors slammed shut behind him, the sound echoing in the now quiet space. I turned to Jenna, who was still on the floor, her face pale and shaken. Our eyes met, and for a moment either of us spoke. The fury and pain from before were still there, simmering beneath the surface, but something had changed. The reality of what could have happened, what almost did, lingered in the air between us. "Why are you still here, Jenna?" I asked, my voice softer now, but no less resolute. "Why are you still living in my house?" Jenna didn't respond immediately. She looked away, her eyes downcast, and for the first time, I saw a crack in her cold, calculating facade. After a long pause, she finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," she said, her words laced with something that almost resembled regret. "I don't know." But it was too late for apologies, too late for second chances. The damage was done, and there was no going back. As I stood there, looking down at the woman who had turned my life upside down, I knew that whatever we had once had was gone, and it wasn't coming back. "Get out, Jenna," I said, my voice steady. "Just get out." Without another word, Jenna stood up, brushing herself off. She didn't look at me as she walked past, didn't say anything as she gathered her things and headed for the door. And as she left, I felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, sadness, anger, but most of all, a sense of finality. The door closed behind her with a quiet click, and I was left standing alone in the house that had once been our home. The silence was deafening, but it was a silence I needed, a space to finally begin to heal. The battle was over, but the scars would remain. And as I stood there, staring at the door Jenna had just walked through, I knew that I had lost something I could never get back. But at least I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my life. And that, I realized, was the most important victory of all.